The courtroom was silent. Too silent, the kind of silence that makes your skin crawl. Judge Rebecca Calloway adjusted her glasses and leaned forward, her gavel resting loosely in her hand. The case in front of her had already dragged on for weeks, but today was supposed to be the final verdict. Then, just as she was about to make her ruling, the doors to the courtroom burst open. A woman stood there, breathless, gripping a leash, and at the other end of that leash was a German shepherd, its sharp brown eyes scanning the room like a detective searching for something. Or someone. The woman's voice was shaky but firm. "Your Honor, please, you have to hear this." A murmur spread through the courtroom. The defense attorney, a middle-aged man with a slicked-back ponytail, scoffed. "This is absurd, Your Honor. A dog. This is a courtroom, not a circus." But Judge Calloway didn't dismiss her. There was something in the woman's expression. Desperation, fear, urgency. And then, as if on cue, the German shepherd let out a deep, low growl that sent a ripple of unease through the entire room. The judge studied the dog carefully. "Who are you?" she asked the woman. The woman took a deep breath. "My name is Emily Carter, and this dog is the only witness who knows the truth." A stunned silence fell over the room. The judge exchanged a glance with the bailiff. Then, after a long pause, she tapped her gavel lightly on the bench. "Proceed," but nobody was prepared for what would happen next. Emily Carter gripped the leash tighter, feeling the tremor in her hands. She had never set foot in a courtroom before today, but she wasn't here for herself. She was here for justice. And Max, the German shepherd standing beside her, was the only one who could help her prove the truth. The judge studied Emily, then glanced at the large dog by her side. "Miss Carter, you have 5 minutes to explain why you've interrupted this trial." Emily swallowed hard. "It's about the case of Daniel Grayson, the man on trial for assaulting a woman 2 months ago." Judge Calloway's eyes narrowed. "And what does your dog have to do with it?" Emily took a deep breath, her mind flashing back to the night it all began. 2 months ago, Emily had been walking Max near a secluded park. It was late, past midnight, and the only sound was the distant hum of streetlights flickering in the cold. Max had always been alert, but that night, something changed. He suddenly stopped, ears erect, body tense. He let out a deep, guttural growl. One that Emily had only heard when he sensed danger. And then she saw it. A man struggling with a woman near a parked car. The woman was trying to scream, but a hand covered her mouth. Emily's heart pounded. Her instincts screamed at her to turn, away, to run, but Max had other plans. With a powerful lunge, he broke free from his leash and charged. The attacker barely had time to react before Max leaped, sinking his teeth into the man's sleeve, yanking him backward with terrifying force. The woman stumbled free, gasping for air. "Help me!" she cried. Emily grabbed her phone, hands shaking as she dialed 911. The attacker, now panicked, managed to shove Max off and ran into the darkness. But not before Max's powerful jaw had ripped a piece of the man's jacket. And now, 2 months later, standing in the courtroom, Emily lifted her trembling hands, holding that very same torn piece of fabric. The courtroom gasped. The defense attorney's face went pale. And Max, he was staring directly at the defendant, growling once again. Judge Calloway's gaze flickered between Emily, Max, and the accused man in the defendant's chair, and then the judge did something that sent chills through the entire room. She leaned forward and said, "Bring the dog to the witness stand." Emily's heart pounded as she processed the judge's words. Bring the dog to the witness stand. A German shepherd in the witness stand? The idea sounded absurd, but Judge Calloway wasn't smiling. She was serious. Emily hesitated. Should she go through with this? Was this even allowed? She looked down at Max. His body was tense, His ears perked, and his gaze locked onto the man in the defendant's chair. Daniel Grayson. Across the room, Grayson sat stiffly, his hands clenched into fists. He looked calm on the outside, but Emily saw it, the way his eyes flickered nervously toward Max. The defense attorney scoffed. "Your Honor, this is ridiculous. A dog is not a witness. This is a court of law, not a petting zoo." Judge Calloway remained unshaken. "Miss Carter, step forward." Emily swallowed hard. This was it, the moment she had been dreading. What if this backfired? What if nobody believed her? She felt the weight of doubt creeping in. She could still walk away, drop the torn fabric, leave the courtroom, and pretend none of this ever happened. But then, Max nudged her hand, just a small touch of his wet nose, against her palm as if to say, "Trust me." Emily exhaled slowly. Max had never let her down before. Gathering her courage, she took a step forward, then another, until she and Max stood right before the judge's bench. Judge Calloway peered down at the dog. "Miss Carter, explain how this animal is connected to the case." Emily gripped the leash tighter. Max saw what happened that night, and he remembers. The courtroom filled with murmurs. Some people shook their heads in disbelief, others leaned forward with curiosity. The defense attorney smirked. "Dogs don't testify, Miss Carter." Emily ignored him. Instead, she crouched beside Max and whispered, "Show them, Max." She reached into her pocket and pulled out a small object, a faded piece of torn fabric. The same piece Max had ripped from the attacker's sleeve 2 months ago. She held it up for everyone to see. "This was in the mouth of my dog when I found him that night. It belongs to the man who attacked that woman." Judge Calloway narrowed her eyes. "And you believe this fabric belongs to the defendant?" Emily turned to Max. Slowly, deliberately, she held the fabric in front of him. Max sniffed once, then twice, and then he let out a deep, guttural growl. But not just at the fabric. At Daniel Grayson. The defendant's face drained of color. The courtroom erupted in gasps. Emily's heart raced. This was it, the proof she needed. But then, Grayson suddenly stood up and slammed his hands on the table. His voice shook with anger. "That dog is lying." Judge Calloway's eyes flashed with suspicion. "Dogs don't lie, Mr. Grayson." "But people do." Silence. And then, she turned to the bailiff. "Take the fabric for forensic testing." Emily felt a lump in her throat. Had she done the right thing? Was this enough? Then, Max did something unexpected. He took a step forward, closer to Grayson, and sniffed. And in that moment, the defendant made a fatal mistake. He flinched, not just a little. He recoiled, like a man caught in the act. Judge Calloway noticed. The entire courtroom noticed. And Emily? She knew in that instant she had just changed the course of the trial. The air in the courtroom felt heavier now, charged with an invisible tension. Everyone had seen it. That tiny, involuntary flinch from Daniel Grayson, the kind of reaction no innocent man should have. Emily's heart pounded in her chest. She could feel Max's body tensing beside her, his instincts sharpening like a blade. He sensed something. Judge Calloway leaned back in her chair, her expression unreadable. "Mr. Grayson, do you have something to say?" The defendant exhaled sharply and forced a laugh. "This is ridiculous, Your Honor. You're basing a case on a dog's reaction. That's not evidence. That's theater." His attorney jumped in, nodding. "I agree, Your Honor. This is completely inappropriate. A dog's instincts are not proof of guilt. This is nothing more than a distraction." Emily clenched her fists. They were trying to brush it off. She knew what she had seen. What everyone had seen. But doubt was a powerful weapon, and the defense was using it masterfully. Then, Max let out a sharp bark, The sound was so sudden, so forceful, that several people in the audience flinched. Even the bailiff took a step back. Emily turned to Max. His fur was bristling now, his tail stiff, his ears locked onto something, or someone. She followed his gaze, and her stomach dropped. Max wasn't just staring at Grayson anymore. He was looking, past him, at someone sitting quietly in the back row of the courtroom, a man in a dark gray suit, expressionless, silent, almost too still. Emily's pulse quickened. Who was he? And why was Max staring at him? She wasn't the only one who noticed. Judge Calloway had picked up on it too. "Miss Carter, is there something wrong?" Emily hesitated. Should she say something? What if she was wrong? Max, however, had already made up his mind. Without warning, he moved. Emily barely had time to react as Max lunged forward, not at Grayson, but toward the back of the courtroom. Gasps filled the room as the bailiff instinctively stepped between Max and the man in the gray suit. But then, it happened. The man jumped up from his seat and bolted toward the exit. Why was he running? The bailiff and 2 officers reacted instantly, chasing after him. Emily's mind spun. Who was that? And why did Max go after him? Judge Calloway slammed her gavel. "Order! Order in the court!" The murmurs and gasps continued, but Emily wasn't paying attention anymore. She was looking at Daniel Grayson, because for the first time since this trial started, he looked truly afraid. And that's when Emily knew something much bigger was going on. The entire courtroom was in chaos. The man in the gray suit had vanished through the exit, chased by 2 officers. People whispered anxiously, stealing glances at Daniel Grayson, whose face had turned pale as a ghost. Emily didn't move. Neither did Max. Her German shepherd stood firm, muscles tense, ears pointed toward the door where the man had fled. He had sensed something before anyone else did. Judge Calloway's voice cut through the murmurs. "Bailiff, what just happened?" Shihui, officer standing by the door, was still speaking into his radio. "Suspect fled the scene. Officers are in pursuit." Suspect? The word sent a chill down Emily's spine. The defense attorney threw his hands in the air. "Your Honor, this is getting out of control. First, we let a dog testify, and now we're chasing random people out of the courtroom. My client is the one on trial, not some stranger." Judge Calloway shot him a sharp look. "You're right. Mr. Benson, your client is on trial, but that man ran for a reason, and I intend to find out why." She turned her gaze to Daniel Grayson. "Do you know who that man was?" Grayson licked his lips, his fingers gripping the table so tightly his knuckles turned white. I don't know." A lie. Emily could see it in his eyes. He knew exactly who that man was. And so did Max. Her dog's tail flicked, his gaze never leaving Grayson. Then, Max took a slow step forward, his nails clicking against the polished courtroom floor. Grayson flinched. Emily's breath caught. There it was again, that reaction. He was scared. Not of the trial. Not of the judge. He was scared of Max. The realization hit her like a train. Max had chased after that man in the gray suit. But what if that wasn't the real target? What if Max had sensed that Grayson was afraid of him before he even did anything? Judge Calloway leaned forward. "Miss Carter, why did your dog react to that man?" Emily hesitated. She had her suspicions. But this wasn't just about what she thought. It was about what she could prove. So, instead of answering, she knelt beside Max and whispered, "Show them." Max turned back to Grayson. He took another slow, deliberate step toward him. Grayson pushed back his chair, and suddenly, he snapped. "Get that dog away from me," he shouted, slamming his fists on the table. Silence. Max didn't move. He just stood there, watching, waiting. Emily rose to her feet, her voice steady. "Why, Mr. Grayson? Why does Max scare you?" Grayson's jaw clenched, his breath coming, out in quick, uneven bursts, and then, before anyone could stop him, he jumped up from his chair and made a run for it. The courtroom erupted in chaos. The bailiff lunged, but Grayson was faster. He shoved past the crowd, dodging the officers who had returned after losing the other suspect. Max reacted instantly. With a powerful leap, he tore forward, weaving through the panicked crowd. Emily barely had time to process what was happening. Her dog was chasing a fugitive. Judge Calloway's voice rang out, "Stop him!" Grayson reached the doors, nearly knocking over a guard. He was seconds away from freedom. But then, Max launched himself. The force of the impact sent Grayson crashing to the floor. The entire courtroom gasped as the man landed hard, pinned beneath 80 pounds of sheer muscle and determination. Max stood over him, his deep growl reverberating through the silent room. And just like that, Daniel Grayson's escape was over. Emily rushed forward, her heart hammering. The officers were already on him, twisting his arms behind his back. He had no way out now. But Emily wasn't watching him anymore. She was staring at Max. Because in front of everyone, in that moment of pure chaos, he had done exactly what he was trained to do. He had caught a criminal. But the real mystery wasn't solved yet. Because somewhere out there, the man in the gray suit was still running, and Emily had a feeling that he was the key to everything. The courtroom was still in shock. Daniel Grayson lay on the floor, pinned beneath Max's unyielding weight. His breaths came in ragged gasps, his eyes wide with panic. The officers wasted no time. Within seconds, they had him handcuffed and hauled to his feet. Max didn't move. His sharp brown eyes stayed locked onto Grayson, his chest rising and falling in steady, controlled breaths. He knew his job wasn't done yet. Emily knelt beside him, running her hand through his fur. "You did good, buddy," she whispered. Max finally relaxed, his ears flicking at the sound of her voice. But even as Grayson was dragged toward the holding room, Emily couldn't shake the uneasy feeling creeping up her spine. Something still wasn't right. The man in the gray suit, he had run. And not just run. He had fled before Grayson even made a move, as if he knew something was about to go wrong. Judge Calloway stood up from her bench, her sharp eyes scanning the room. "I want a full report on that man," she told the officers. "Find him." The bailiff nodded, speaking into his radio. But Emily wasn't listening anymore. She was staring at Max. Because for the first time since all of this started, he was shaking. Max, the fearless German shepherd who had faced down criminals, stood his ground in a courtroom and tackled a fugitive, was trembling. Emily's heart twisted. She touched his side gently. "Max?" He didn't flinch, but his breathing was uneven now. His pause shifted slightly, and when he turned his head to look at her, his eyes seemed different. Not fierce, not sharp, but tired. That's when she saw it. A faint reddish smear on his back. Leg, blood. Emily's breath caught in her throat. Oh my God! She dropped to her knees, inspecting the wound. It wasn't deep, but it was enough. Somewhere in the chaos, Max had gotten hurt. How had she not seen it earlier? Max let out a low whimper when she touched it, and that sound, that tiny, pained sound, broke something inside her. Judge Calloway must have noticed her panic. "Miss Carter, what's wrong?" Emily swallowed hard. "He's hurt." For the first time, she saw concern flash across the judge's face. "Get this dog to a vet. Now." Emily didn't need to be told twice. She turned to Max, cupping his face in her hands. "Come on, boy. Let's get you out of here." Hours later, Emily sat in the waiting room of the veterinary clinic, her hands clasped together so tightly, her knuckles had turned white. The moment she had carried Max into the exam room, the vet had taken him back, and now all she could do was wait. Her mind raced. The trial. The gray-suited man. Grayson's reaction. Everything had happened so fast. But none of it mattered right now, because Max, her best friend, her protector, was behind those doors. And for the first time since she had rescued him all those years ago, she felt completely helpless. She exhaled shakily. "You have to be okay, Max." Then, the door opened. Emily shot to her feet as the vet walked in, wiping his hands on his coat. His face was calm, but his expression was serious. "He's stable," he said. "But there's something you need to see." Emily's stomach dropped. The vet gestured for her to follow, and as she stepped into the exam room, she saw Max lying on the table. His wound was cleaned, a small bandage wrapped around his leg. He looked up at her with tired but gentle eyes. Relief flooded through her. "Hey, buddy," Max's tail wagged weakly. But the vet wasn't looking at Max. He was holding something small, something wrapped in a piece of cloth. "We found this embedded in his fur," he said, unwrapping the object. Emily leaned in, and her blood ran cold, a tiny metallic tracking device. Her heartbeat thundered in her ears. "What is that?" The vet shook his head. "It's not normal. This isn't a microchip. It's a tracker, and it wasn't implanted. It was attached." Emily's hands trembled. Someone had tagged Max. Someone had been watching him. Watching her. Her pulse quickened. The man in the gray suit. Who was he, and how long had they been tracking Max? A realization hit her like a brick. This trial wasn't just about Daniel Grayson anymore. It was about something bigger, something dangerous. And if they had been tracking Max, then whoever was behind this wasn't done with them yet. Emily stared at the tracking device in the vet's hand, her pulse hammering in her ears. Someone had been tracking Max. But why? She forced herself to breathe, her mind racing through possibilities. Daniel Grayson had reacted to Max as if he had seen a ghost, as if he knew the dog. And the man in the gray suit? He had run the moment Max approached him, long before the tension in the courtroom even peaked. What if they weren't afraid of Max? What if they were afraid of what Max knew? Emily swallowed hard, running a shaky hand over Max's fur. The German shepherd watched her, his dark eyes steady, waiting. He didn't know what was happening. Not entirely, but Emily could tell. He sensed the danger, too. The vet cleared his throat. "Do you want us to report this to the police?" Emily's eyes flicked toward the device. Something about it bothered her. The size, the design. It was too advanced, too small to be a typical GPS tag. This wasn't just something any random person could buy off the internet. No, this was military grade. Her fingers curled into fists. If she handed this over now, she might never know the full truth, so she shook her head. "Not yet." The vet hesitated. "Miss Carter, if someone was tracking your dog, that means—" "I know." Emily's voice was firm. "Just, please don't tell anyone about this. Not yet." The vet didn't push. He simply nodded, placing the device back in the cloth before handing it to her. "Be careful, Emily," she exhaled sharply, shoving the device into her pocket. Then she turned to Max. "Come on, buddy." Max let out a soft woof and hopped off the table, landing lightly on his bandaged leg. Despite everything, he still stood tall. And Emily knew this wasn't over, not even close. Back at home, a warning in the dark Emily barely made it through her front door before the exhaustion hit her like a wave. Max padded inside beside her, tail flicking as he scanned the familiar space. Even injured, he was on alert. She shut the door, double-checking the locks before tossing her keys onto the counter. The tracking device felt heavy in her pocket. She needed answers. Digging out her laptop, she placed the device next to it. Her fingers flying across the keyboard as she searched for any possible matches. But nothing came up. It was too unique, too classified. Her stomach churned. Who the hell was watching her? A sharp bark snapped her out of her thoughts. She turned. Max was staring at the door, frozen. Emily's breath caught in her throat. "Max!" He took a step forward, his ears pinned back. A low, rumbling growl vibrated from deep within his chest. Then, a knock. Her blood ran cold. She didn't move. Neither did Max. Another knock. This time, firmer. She sucked in a breath. Who would come to her house this late? The police? The court? Or someone worse? Her hands curled into fists as she slowly approached the door. Max followed, his muscles taut like a coiled spring. She hesitated, then yanked it open, and her stomach dropped. Standing on her porch was a man in a gray suit, not the same one from the courtroom, someone else. He was older, his salt and pepper, hair neatly combed back, his expression unreadable. But his eyes, his cold, calculating eyes, locked onto Max first. He knew. Emily's breath hitched. "Who are you?" The man smiled. "You need to stop digging, Miss Carter." She went stiff. "Excuse me?" He tilted his head. "Walk away from this case. Take your dog and leave town." Emily's blood boiled. Or what? The man sighed, slipping his hands into his pockets. "Or you'll regret it." Max let out a sharp, snarling bark, stepping between them. The man barely reacted, but he did take one step back. Emily noticed. Max unnerved him. That meant he was involved. She lifted her chin, staring him down. "Get off my property." For a moment he just watched her. Then with a smirk he muttered, "Suit yourself." And he walked away. Emily stood frozen as she watched him disappear into the night. Her heart thundered in her chest. This wasn't just some random trial. This was bigger, and now she was officially in danger. The night air was thick with tension. Emily couldn't shake the feeling that the man in the gray suit's warning had been more than just idle threats. It had been a promise. Max stood by her side, his body still tense and alert. He hadn't taken his eyes off the dark streets since the man had left. Something was out there. She knew it, and Max knew it too. They had been in danger before, together. But this felt different, more dangerous. Emily paced the length of the house, glancing at the windows, pulling the curtains shut. It wasn't enough. There was no safe place anymore, not even within the walls of her own home. Max whimpered softly, his ears flicking toward the door. Emily froze, her breath catching in her throat. There it was again, a faint rustling sound, like footsteps in the yard. But they weren't normal footsteps. No, these were heavy, deliberate, like someone was moving carefully, with purpose. She crept toward the window and pulled it open just enough to hear better. Max was now standing completely still. His body was low, almost crawling on the floor as his ears twitched with each passing moment. His breathing was barely audible, his focus so sharp it was as though he could hear something she couldn't. Another rustle. This time, closer.